Yeah, that's fine.
I'm gonna keep meeting people. And there is probably a better way to do this where you're
I'm
meet
based in
everyone at
Seattle.
once, but I'm just gonna regulate because if someone start to share that stuff, I'm just gonna remove it. So
bring the hammer.
exactly, that hammer, bring it in. So hello everyone. This is event organized by by my Discord that is called Everything Everywhere XR, and also Norman's Discord that is called AR, MR, and XR. This event is an event where we feature speakers that are working in the industry. I just want to say, because we will have a limited amount of time, I just want to let you know that on the meetup event there are additional information. You can eventually just continue some conversation and ask some questions on the Discord. This is also an educational content because it's not really related to my job. I'm not promoting anyone activity. I'm just doing it for the sake of just having fun and creating a community around amazing work. Speaking of like topics that are current and informing everyone of things, because things are moving very fast in the industry. I mean, they always did, but especially now with this AI wave, it feels like it's very tough to keep up with things every day. So I just want to say that this is also for informing everyone of what's going on. And if there are questions, let's keep it for the end. Because I would just like, we have a limited amount of time and I would like to give to every speaker the availability and possibility to describe their work, what they think about certain topics. And then if we have extra time, I'm also down to stay a little more and just go through different questions. Let's see if we can have everyone speaking in this time before than doing that. So yeah, let's get started. The event is also on the meetup, and there is just an introduction now, and then at 6:10 there is Bilawal, Sidhu, with reality capture, generative AI, emerging reality and imagination with NeRFs, control net, and stable diffusion. Just a very quick introduction. I think you guys all know Bilawal from amazing tweets and amazing contents. I think it's very cool that now we have developers slash creators slash, like engineers slash designers and all of these figures that are coming in the industry to do quite a lot of all the work. And it's very inspiring to see it because it's kind of like a trendsetter for the industry indirectly, I think. Because also big companies look at all of those tweets and what this technology can deliver. Also as a solo developer, I think everything starts to move from there. So please go ahead, introduce yourself as you prefer, and please start your presentation. Take the stage.
Awesome, cool. Alessio, thank you so much for having me and for that kind introduction. Let me jump into the 2D metaverse and present my screen. All right, so hi everyone, I'm Bilawal. I'm an AI creator entrepreneur. Previously spent 6 years at Google, spent about a decade exclusively in the AR, VR, and 3D map space. Along the way, I built a following of a little over 1 million folks across YouTube and TikTok. So I love all things creative technology. So when you were describing the multi-hyphenated nature of the field, that definitely resonates a lot with me. All right, so the topic for today, in about 10 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about reality capture and generative AI, why it's a very powerful combination that hasn't been explored as much yet. And once you can perceive and model the complexity of reality, how generative AI gives you this amazing ability to reskin and augment it. All the things we've been talking about, sort of the AR like overlay future of the world, is now suddenly within hand's reach. So I'll walk you through a couple of my experiments, and along the way, I'll keep peppering across their key takeaways for how you can start integrating this into your own work. All right, so first and foremost, let's talk about NeRFs. So unless you've been living under a rock, you probably heard the term neural radiance fields. What the heck is it? Well, before we answer that question, let's look at some pretty visuals. They look amazing. And certainly they do an amazing job of modeling the complexity of reality, as I alluded to. But what the heck is a NeRF? To answer that question, we kind of need to go even a level up and answer the question of what is reality capture? What is photogrammetry? Photogrammetry, very simply put, is the art and science of measuring things in the real world using photos. That's the photo in photogrammetry, but also other sensors like LiDAR. What's cool about NeRFs is it's this like ML learned based approach to doing reality capture. So essentially what you're doing is you're asking this AI to take like 100 photos of a static object or a scene and essentially eyeball ray tracing. So this is what it looks like when you train a NeRF. It's creating this like true volumetric representation where for every like voxel in 3D space, you've got a RGB color value, but also transparency associated with it. So you can model a lot of interesting and complex effects. I'll skip over the history of how we got here, but there's like obviously like I encourage you to read the blog later on sort of what the history is leading up to NeRFs. But the unique thing is instead of ending up with this like 3D mesh or model, which you can certainly eventually make, with NeRFs too, you're basically modeling the complexity of reality by the weights of this like multi-layer perceptron. And that's kind of amazing. Why is that amazing? All right, so well, how does this work? NeRF and photogrammetry sort of start off the same way. You pose some imagery, and then that's where the similarities end. What do I mean by posing imagery? So let's say you got about 100 photos of this static object, this Buddha statue in Chandigarh in North India. Beautiful place. And by the way, this is taken with like an iPhone 7 Plus. So this is like really, really old imagery. You can pose it, basically figure out the relative position of where these images were taken by just triangulating those positions, assuming that the environment is static. So once you do that, you end up with something that looks a lot like this. Let's compare it with what the photogrammetry version looks like. If you run these exact images through a photogrammetry pipeline, an optimized model looks like this, right? It's really good, very detailed. You can drop this into a 3D engine. Certainly I baked down all the high frequency details into a normal map too. So you can see all like the nuances, but it's still like this abstraction of reality. And also I've lost all the background context, right? Let's jump to a point cloud representation, which is sort of this earlier stage in a classical photogrammetry pipeline. And here you can really start illustrating the differences between NeRFs and photogrammetry itself. So this is a dense point cloud. So you did the posing, you created these depth maps, and then you created this dense point cloud. As you can see, anywhere there's like reflections or there's no textures on the surface, you don't really have all that information. So it's picking up like the staircase here on the back. It's picking up some of the dimensionality and the structure there. Again, this is amazing if you want to maybe measure stuff, like how tall is the statue, answer like factual questions about measurement. But if you want to encapsulate the sort of the vibe of this place, all that background context is lost and gone, right? And like there's certainly a lot of trickery and hackery you could do manually in a game engine to take like a 360 panel, like filling in a bunch of these holes, but you get all of that out of the box with NeRFs. Because unlike solving this problem of measuring stuff, the thing that NeRFs are solving for is this problem of view synthesis. So basically, given that bag of about 100 images, how do you create this volumetric representation that lets you interpolate between all of those viewpoints, but also go outside of the capture volume? So I love how like the reflections, the refractions, all that type of stuff is nicely modeled here. So as Alessio mentioned, like this industry is moving fast. So this was about 10 months ago. And at that point, the state of the art was using NVIDIA Instant NGP. You could train something. This was like what, a 4.5 gig NeRF. You have to wrangle some like collabs, call map scripts, all this type of stuff. Fast forward to today, and you can basically do this all with the iPhone in your pocket using Luma AI, right? So I made this capture on an iPhone, pushed off the processing job on an iPhone, did the camera animation on an iPhone, and you end up with phenomenal results. So it's amazing how accessible this tech is just within 10 months. So you're seeing these timelines sort of compress. Obviously, you can do a bunch of cool things with NeRFs here. Night types, all these sort of like hard to do scenarios for photogrammetry is suddenly unlocked. Even things like reframing stock footage, right? And one more thing I'd note compared to photogrammetry, you don't need that many images. So like with 150 images, you can get really, really good results. So that's the reality capture portion. Let's talk about reskinning reality, right? So you probably heard about stable diffusion. You probably also heard about image to image, which is a way of giving these diffusion models at a very high level work by denoising the image and imbuing structure and meaning into the image based on the text prompt that you give it, right? So the most naive thing you could do is just run it through image to image, but you end up with something that looks kind of like this, little bit of a flickery mess. Maybe you're leaning into that aesthetic quality. So how do you get something that's a little bit more temporally coherent, that respects the 3D structure of the scan that we're giving it? So Stable Diffusion actually launched something late last year in November called Depth to Image as a part of Stable Diffusion 2.0. And basically what that let you do is provide a depth map in addition to this RGB image to guide this diffusion process. So think of it like gray boxing in game development, right? You've got this core structure of a scene, like you might box things out, but then now you can suddenly type in a text prompt to get something far more realistic. To really illustrate this, let's take this example of like the class deck. This is me just toggling through every possible style combination, right? So you can see where I'm probably going with this, right? If you've got a more complex composition, you want to try like a Lego style aesthetic, easy. Type in large hadron collider. Suddenly, with the same like geometric structure, you can start stylizing and exploring different things that respect the underlying depth map. Fast forward to early Feb, just a couple months ago, and a seminal paper called ControlNet came out, which not only was like faster and cheaper to train, it also allowed you to use any checkpoint of Stable Diffusion. So you can no longer restrict it to Stable Diffusion 2.0. You can use 1.5, whatever variation that you want, and then use a bunch of these like purpose-built models, right? Like depth estimation, pose estimation, and use that in concert with a frozen checkpoint of Stable Diffusion to guide this like diffusion process. To illustrate this, like let's say you want to have this exact shot, let's say of an anime character sitting in this chair, rather than spending like 100 iterations trying to get this exact shot out and say in like Midjourney, what you could do is decompose this into the depth map itself that nicely represents all the structure, and then the full body pose of the character, and start combining these things together in an interesting way. So I use that to create this like interior redesign experiment. So my workflow was roughly do a photogrammetry scan, use the depth map, then use ControlNet to figure out different style keyframes, basically restyling this interior, like this drawing room effectively, and then using something called Absinthe to smooth out their transitions. This is what the final result looks like. Essentially me toggling through a bunch of different styles. Here's what's happening under the hood. That's the input scene, like literally a photogrammetry scan in Sketchfab. And then you're seeing like the various restyling results on the top. What's cool about this is like with ControlNet, you could use multiple methods of control. So the depth map encodes all of this like unique type of Indian furniture, basically, into the diffusion process. But what about the wall in the back, the paintings, all this type of stuff? So there with ControlNet, you can use something called Canny. A bunch of other models exist to do edge detection. So that'll pick out all the nuanced details of like the flat surfaces in the scene. You can see where I'm probably going with this. When you start composing these things together, you can start doing some very, very interesting things. In fact, again, a testament to how fast things are moving. Some of these requests were made to the developer and like the developer implemented it. So now you don't even have to go through all of the hackery that I just walked you through. And you can end up with results that look kind of like this. Again, all the thin structures, the graffiti on the wall, all of that stuff is retained. And you've got the beginnings of this awesome video to video pipeline. Here's a little bit of a peek under the hood. NeRF gives you like these immaculate depth maps that you could exploit for all sorts of different purposes. Of course, you can apply this to video as well. That works really well. There are tools like Gen 1 that are making this even easier. And again, just a testament to how fast things move even more. I'm just talking about like 6 or 7 months, how much things have advanced in video to video. Kyber is a startup that's made that entire process even faster in one click. So that's going to be coming out of beta shortly as well. So there we go, bringing this all back to the end. I'm at time here. Hopefully that gave you a flavor for how reality capture and generative AI make a really powerful combination, and how you can start capturing the complexity of reality. Really just think of it like kit bashing reality together. You don't have to start from scratch. You can take advantage of these like democratized techniques for scanning objects, spaces, people, places that you care about, and bringing that into your artistic creations and taking that to the next. Oh, I still have 5 minutes. Oh my God. I'm like I'm way ahead of time then. Honestly, I don't even have much more to add other than like you can do a lot of dope stuff with it. Maybe one other thing that I'd add is all of these things that we talked about are essentially post capture processing, right? And we're talking about like 2.5D manipulation, right? Like, so yeah, you're encoding the structure of this like 3D scene from that specific viewpoint. That's what's encoded in the depth map. There's some really interesting paper recently coming out about going more into the input imagery itself. So what if you could capture this NeRF and then take a technique like instruct pix to pix to type in a text prompt to restyle it, right? Like, let's say you want to explore seasonality, time of day. Maybe you want to reskin the statue to look like different animals. You can do that by going back to the input image. And what the researchers are doing there, they're doing this in an iterative fashion. And that over time is kind of enforcing like multi-view consistency. So you can see after every iteration, like the bear is looking far more consistent from these different viewpoints. So then you go about processing an NeRF as usual. So you end up with like this like volumetric end, result that's like useful for all sorts of things, but you're doing it now to this input imagery, all sorts of fun stuff. You want to do like, freaking, costume redesigns, all sorts of fun stuff is like completely possible. So all this to say, 6 months ago, you had to wrangle call map, instant NGP, FFmpeg, stable diffusion 1.5, freaking depth to image, EBSynth, all this type of stuff. There's a bunch of tools out there that let you do this in a one-click process. Just take Luma and Kyber, and you can replicate all of what I'm doing with just a couple clicks. And that's freaking awesome. And of course, where this will go next is more native 3D representations. But yeah, I'll stop there. If this was interesting to y'all, feel free to check out my Substack, Creative Technology Digest. And of course, all the things that I walk through are also available on my Twitter. Feel free to follow me. I've got a bunch of these threads broken down into great detail. And with that, I will hand it back to Alessio.
Thank you so much. This is so great to see, and I just wanna like bring up something that like I don't know, like I personally always kind of did the work of prototyping. I didn't know there was a title until now, but like it's exactly like taking a lot of different tools, a lot of different things, and like put them together. And every time you're kind of creating a concept for like a product, like what you just showed, it's might be maybe in like 1 or 2 years. I think also like probably less time, like a product that you see outside. So I feel like it's an exciting moment now because you see all of these kind of little components that are put the one by one together, and people assemble it and they come up with a different solution. And this space is like very exciting because you're basically just like doing a recipe, you're creating your own recipe for your app, and every time it's just like mind-blowing that you see someone that did it slightly different and it's just giving you different result, and you're exploring all of that. And it's very valuable to see the fact that you release it, the fact that you're very present, the fact that you share it. That I'm impressed by, for example, that kind of manipulation of the 3D modeling based on depth, because kind of like solve the issue of having just a skybox. So it's like I see now, for example, there's a lot of skybox generation with stable diffusion, which is very handy because you're creating skybox on the go. But like this one, it's basically the same, a little bit more 3D accurate. Like it really kind of gives you a different, like you can create different variation of 3D models. It's a big one.
If I may add to that, if I may just add to that, I think you're bringing up also another point, which is it's like this AI art creative tech community is so open about sharing stuff, which means we all learn from each other. And then like product companies integrate this stuff, which is a lot of fun. But also from an AR perspective, it's interesting to think about how this sort of sidesteps the classic AR pipeline, right? To do this use case of like interior reskinning, classically you'd want to create this like explicit 3D mesh representation, and then you're figuring out how to like have these like parametric 3D models that line up perfectly. Then you're doing like lighting estimation, and you can kind of just do that like a freaking depth map in a photo, right? In a web UI now. And then as you start fine tuning these models to include like actual furniture that's like perhaps, let's say, an IKEA or Wayfair thing, you can start imbuing like specific annotations of things that are like you could go and buy, right? So it's fascinating to me how this is all going to bleed into all the XR stuff too. And yeah, it's awesome that it's happening in the open.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Stay tuned, and if anyone has some question, please keep it, and we will be coming back with Bilawal. Bilawal, sorry. Is that the right one? There you go, Bilawal.
You got it. You got it.
Thank you. So let's go next, and I'm just going to introduce the next guest, which is called Dan Scarfe. Thanks for joining, Dan, and thanks for telling us about your journey with XRI Glass. If I'm not mistaken, bringing XR and AI together to create live subtitles. And if I just want to expand on that, like if there is something that I always like try to give more value in XR since day one that I started to play with this technology is like text. I love to see text in AR. I think it's just impressive to me to see like informations without any background and very, like we are all day looking through news, social, we are consuming text all day, basically. It's it can be audio, it can be video, but there is a lot of text in all of the interfaces that we use. So I think that there would be the first, for me, one of the main product to kind of like open the bubble of AR would be definitely having a consistent text product that gives you value. So please go ahead and the stage is yours. Please share your amazing project.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for having me. And if I felt out of my depth before I joined the call, then I most certainly feel out of my depth now. I think I understood at least 3 things maybe that you said, Bilawal, in that previous section. So I'm not from the AR world. I spent 20 years in enterprise IT. But I'm now out of that world and wanted to do something a little bit more exciting. So our marketing clearly failed because you didn't catch the fact that it's X-ray, as in X-ray glasses, and who didn't want a pair of X-ray glasses as a kid. There's a personal story behind this. In fact, there's 2 personal stories. My granddad, one of the other founders' dad, both suffer from hearing loss, and we, observe firsthand, how isolating it can be to watch a family member, not able to engage in conversation. But this is, a big problem, depending on what stat you look at, maybe 1 in 5 people in the world have some kind of hearing loss. When you start to, expand that to those with, neurodiverse conditions as well, you're looking at maybe, 1 in 3 people around the world. So this is a huge, huge challenge, accessibility in general. So we set off on our mission to subtitle the world through easy to use and empowering technology. So, how could we actually make this technology available to everyone? And hopefully the audio you'll be able to hear from this video. So if you don't hear any audio, maybe someone just shout.
We are living in a world that's more connected than ever. But for many people who are deaf or hard of hearing,
sorry to stop. Do you guys see the video share? Okay.
No video.
No video.
I just want to be sure. I can try share it myself if there are any issue, but
let me just try doing it from this way instead. So if I just go share a tab, share this one. Okay, let's try this again.
Yep, perfect.
We help you find a domain that fits your business.
We are living in a world that's more connected than ever. But for many people who are deaf or hard of hearing, it hasn't always felt that way. Even with assistive devices, everyday life can still be challenging for those with varying levels of hearing loss. So when we launched X-Ray Glass, an AR software that uses smart glasses to translate audio into subtitles in real time, we knew it would be so much more than just revolutionary tech. Introducing Life Subtitled. Rather than solely showcasing impressive technical features, we positioned X-Ray Glass as a lifestyle brand that genuinely augments lives for the better. We established a team of brand ambassadors from different walks of life who were deaf or hard of hearing and invited them to experience X-Ray Glass for the first time.
Oh my days, it's literally right in front of me. That's amazing.
Everything I'm saying, yeah, that is crazy.
Oh my.
Why am I crying?
Real reactions with a real response. Over 6,500 pieces of media coverage.
That is absolute genius.
And it wasn't just those who are deaf or hard of hearing that saw the benefits of X-Ray Glass.
This is awesome.
resulting in 820 million in combined reach. We saw a 1,000% increase in online searches. Then, the glasses sold out on Amazon. And our software was noticed. We showed how tech can be human by giving people more access to the world they deserve to be a part of. One where we're all connected. Life, subtitled.
So that gives you a little idea of what we got up to, and then hopefully if I quickly go back to here, and I'm conscious I'm running slightly behind, but I did only get 5 minutes, so maybe I can steal a couple of extra minutes. So as you saw on the video there, we've got real-time subtitles across today, 11 different languages, 76 soon to be. We can do real-time translation in and out of any of those languages, so you can engage in conversation with people who don't speak the same language. And you're probably wondering why I'm on a call about generative AI, and the answer, of course, is ChatGPT. So we've taken effectively your entire conversation history and turned that into a prompt up to ChatGPT. So you can now ask questions about the conversation you're in, like, hey X-Ray, what was it that we were just talking about? Or hey X-Ray, what was the answer to the pub quiz question you just heard? No, you can't do that. But anything you like, and effectively using that generative AI to help people in their everyday life, be that making suggestions of things that they might say, giving them feedback, whatever it might be. Now in the video you saw obviously the NeRFs, for those of you in the know. So they were the glasses that we launched with. We also have support for the TCL NextWear S. We also have the support for the Think Reality A3. We've demonstrated our software running on the new reference design from Qualcomm at Mobile World Congress, and we are in the process of working with TCL to get it onto the Rainio X as well. I won't even begin to try and describe how this works behind the covers, but if any of you are interested, you can take a screenshot and look through. So this is how our translation and transcription engine works, and then this is our Open AI assistant. So that is about all I wanted to say. I think I am only 1 minute left over. Of course, anyone that has followed anything that we've done will know that there is one notable exception to our product lineup, and I won't say anything more other than it is our first birthday on the 5th of May, and who knows what we might announce. So there we go. That's it from me. Kinds of things. I mean, that's why it's so exciting. But initially when we started out, we were looking to help people who were deaf or hard of hearing. So it was very much around using the technology to help people to hear. But when we integrated ChatGPT, actually you go a step beyond that now, and it's helping people to understand. And that's that's a broad phrase, of course, but you start to look at, as I mentioned in the thing, neurodiversity, dyslexia, ADHD, an ability to be in a lecture theatre using something like this, and to be able to ask clarifying questions about something that they missed, or to be able to be reminded of something that they heard yesterday that they were supposed to do. I mean, this kind of actually properly personal assistant. That's the bit that kind of excites us the most. And the transcription is almost a Trojan horse to get access to the conversation data in order to be able to provide this assistant over the top of it effectively. So that was what we've been up to.
Let me just see if I can share my slide deck. I have a boring old presentation. Oh yeah, it's Trzynadlowski. It's Trzynadlowski, like chin. Let me just see if this is going to play. I'm hoping. Does everybody still see this? Like, is this still coming across? Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for having me. And by the way, those two presentations before were just amazing. And Dan, I definitely think we should talk. Your applications are very near and dear to my heart for reasons I can't fully talk about on here publicly. But yeah, so I want to talk about AR as the ultimate interface for AI, and a little bit more about me. You can follow me on social media. I'm not a super active poster. I've been doing AR since 2016, when I got the HoloLens and I really kind of fell in love with the medium. So you can kind of see what I've been up to across these links here. From 2018 to 2021, I was at Apple as an AR prototyper, doing kind of prototypes to investigate what future product directions might look like for the company in that space. And since 2021, I've been on my own. I've been working on Rec as the CTO, which is a company developing an MR fitness application. But I'm also, doing just a lot of just exploration with this, exciting stuff that's been happening in the last few years. So without further ado, I'm going to wade into the nomenclature wars here. I just wanted to clarify what I mean by AR as distinct from mixed reality. So mixed reality headsets, as I'm defining them here, can be...
The slides aren't changing for me. I don't know if it's for everyone else too.
Oh, okay. Darn. Oh man, I should have known better than to do this on a Macintosh. All right, whatever. Like I'll just have it in this window. I don't think there's any way to do it any other way on a Mac, unfortunately. Yeah, again, the first, these are my social media links. I'll have them at the end, so we can go back to that later. Yeah, so mixed reality headsets can be optical see-through, like HoloLens and Magic Leap are great examples. But lately there's been a lot of talk about pass-through headsets. Great examples are, of course, the entire Quest line and the Vario XR series, of course. Mixed reality, I think what distinguishes it from augmented reality in my mind is that it really kind of emphasizes high fidelity, spatialized 3D visuals. So really trying to like blend in with your environment, really have everything kind of be integrated as if it were a real object. Unfortunately, I don't know if we can play this video in this view here, but let's try. This is actually a video of Rec, something that we're working on Quest in pass-through. So you can see it's really kind of going for that mixed reality feel where the objects are really kind of grounded in your space. And there's all these kind of like gee whiz effects, like breaking through the ceiling here, which are kind of really designed to kind of seamlessly blend the real and the virtual worlds. This is this kind of tech has been actually around for a while. So this demo here is on HoloLens, which is an optical see-through device, and this demo is from 2018. It's actually a game that I published on the App Store there. And if you look closely, you can see that like objects, are occluded by the bed and so forth. So again, like, really going for this kind of high fidelity virtual things in your environment, kind of aesthetic, right? And I think that the other thing that's kind of really important to mention is that mixed reality devices, as I see them at least, are task-oriented and like session-based devices. So they're not designed to be all-day wearable devices. It's kind of like you want to do something, you get in there, you do it, and then you get out. So content consumption or content creation, perhaps using generative AI. By contrast, augmented reality kind of refers to the glasses, form factor, and specifically, being all day or at least long time wearable. So the actual interactions that you're having would be short duration, but maybe multiple interactions throughout the day, each very short duration due to the form factor constraints, not having a lot of power there. In such a small form factor, that would necessitate, augmentations being minimalistic, which is also not just because of the hardware, but I think it's actually what people would want in an all-day product. I don't think you want, nobody really wants to have like realistic characters running around, even if it were possible to do so. It's just not really something that you want. You want less pixels, not more, and kind of you want to be present in your world is I think where a lot of this is going. And perhaps sometimes spatialized, but not always. These are, almost exclusively, optical see-through glasses form factor type devices. There's not a lot out there right now, and the vision just is far from being realized yet. But some early hints at it are things like the North Focals, and the Vuzix Blade has a similar form factor, and there's a bunch of other glasses. Here, here are the Snap. I guess I should be wearing these, the Snap spectacles, although only about 10 minutes of battery life at a time. And I think the real use cases will be kind of like phone-like, smartwatch-like use cases, so contextual assistance and so forth. And I think, and this is really the form factor that the industry is betting the big dollars on. This is what they really want to achieve, and the idea is that this could have, some impact on the smartphone market, perhaps, or at least rival that market is the hope in the very distant future. Now, whether that's money well spent or a money pit is a discussion for another panel probably. But it is kind of where the long-term vision of the industry is. And so, of course, generative AI, using existing content to create new output, where output is not necessarily restricted just to art. Why is this useful, or why is AR the ultimate interface for it? Well, AI is designed to serve us. but we don't exist in a browser window. As you know, a lot of these, AI applications are kind of tied down to form factors that are not really, naturally connected to us. You're either in a smartphone or on a computer or whatever. AR promises to kind of be there when we need it. It's supposed to always be there. Like right now, like I can go outside, wear these things. So our perspective, the things that we're seeing and experiencing can be fed into, AI, which we know is multimodal. And then its output can be there for us when we actually need it in the situations that we need it. So I know you can't read the text in the ChatGPT window, but it was actually a workout plan that someone asked for. And you can imagine that, like, in the old days, like with Google, with what is it, MapQuest, if you're old enough to remember, you would like get your directions and like print them out on paper and then go drive with them. And now, you just have it on your phone. It's kind of the same thing here. Like the workout plan thing really would make a lot more sense if it was, there when I need it at the gym, so I don't have to like remember it or bring a notebook or pull out my phone and use some app, just kind of ask for it. And there's countless situations like that. So regarding generative AI for AR, I think one of the big things, of course, is, natural language interfaces. And Dan, I think, really covered this topic pretty well. So being able to, have that context about what you're looking at, what you're doing, including this concept of what's called a deictic reference. So being able to like refer to something without like explicitly saying what it is, because it's clear from the context that you're in what you're referring to. This is a demo I did called Chat AR Kit. I'll just play it. Basically, it's showing it was a really crude demo. It's open source on my GitHub. Showing a little bit of this because you'll notice that I discuss. I mentioned like nearest plane. I could have also just said table, and it kind of understands.
Put a sports car on the nearest table, then rotate it by 90 degrees and make it move back and forth along.
So hopefully you can hear the audio from the window. I'm not sure, but if not, it showed here. I've had a sports car placed on the table and have it drive back and forth. And using ChatGPT, it generates the code to do that.
Okay,
and
that
just does
perfect. It. Now move it to the floor.
Then asking it, to go to the floor. Boom, there it is. Now that's not a great example of what I think an application of AR glasses would be. This is definitely kind of more in that mixed reality domain. It was just more of a tech demo, but kind of hinting at like how natural. It was just amazing to me how easily that kind of natural language approach can be integrated into an app with just a few lines of code using generative AI. So of course, generative AI is also good at, and again, this is kind of hitting back on use cases that Dan was talking about, information ingress and comprehension, understanding speech and text, and being able to do transformations on that. And of course, scene understanding is another big topic. This picture is from a presentation that Facebook gave on their new segment anything model, which kind of uses concepts from generative AI to produce a better segmentation model than has been seen before, really pushing the state of the art. So the real potential that the industry sees in AR glasses is this idea of like a seamless context-aware computing interface, I think. And this picture here is by Lauren Cason. If you go to her website, laurencason.com, she has this amazing cooking demo that she did on this device, actually, that really, I think, hints at what the future could look like. And coincidentally, Lauren and I actually worked together on the same team at Apple. And she's been kind of doing some awesome stuff since then. And I think that, watching that video is a really, cool example of where AR, could hopefully go one day. And I mean AR, not mixed reality. So, AR is all about, kind of computing the world. AR glasses should be able to kind of see and hear the world from our perspective. That's really powerful. And it, obviously provides an amazing, rich input for generative AI. They should be able to present contextually relevant information. Again, from Lauren, I'm using pictures from Lauren's demo because it's such a great example of this. And provide situation appropriate interfaces. That's kind of the promise of what AR might be. Lastly, this is kind of an important concept, integrating into the many threads of our lives as they weave in and out of the foreground. And the reason I have this picture of someone snacking is there's lots of examples of this, but one good example is kind of like the kind of dieting nutrition use case. We're all aware there's like calorie and nutrition trackers out there, but it's a little bit hard to actually be honest about that. Like every time you snack, go down to the pantry between meetings, whatever, or if you're out at a restaurant, you're probably not going to record honestly like what you've been doing. It's just not a very good user flow. You can imagine this is a situation where, and this is kind of something that happens in discrete events throughout the day. If you were able to wear glasses all day that could detect that, it's just an absolutely killer use case. And there's a lot of that, in terms of like our work and so forth. We don't really usually conduct a lot of things in a session-based way. We do it throughout different locations and times throughout the day or multiple days. And I think the promise there is having that, compute assistants, being able to like understand and integrate all that information. And then I want to just kind of go through some, potential specific use cases that I think would be, amazing. Whether they're doable or not is another question. But, a way to think about this is viewing AR as a superpower. So, super memory. This is an example of Otter AI, which we're using right now to transcribe this meeting. It works on a PC or on a phone, but imagine if you could have this all the time and be able to distill information from your conversations, extract action items, and then surface that information when you actually need it. Super perception. So this idea of having like sight beyond sight, being able to just help you see, like whether it's magnifying things or translating things, as in this famous Google demo, being able to communicate with people in their languages, helping you hear, again, going back to, I think Dan just did a whole basically talk on that incredibly important application. Navigation, right? A very kind of classical AR use case, perhaps better than what we have right now on the phone, in that it, who hasn't been in the Bay Area or somewhere, right, where you've got like these like 5-lane roads, you make a turn, and then all of a sudden it's like you got to turn left, and you're like, oh crap, I've been in the wrong lane the whole time. I wish I had known ahead of time. That context is really important. I call this the superpower of being super smooth communication. There's this great demo on Brian Chiang's Twitter using the Monocle AR device, where they're using ChatGPT for what they call charisma as a service. So, maybe helping you communicate better, kind of suggesting things you might want to say, or at least giving you feedback on how you are speaking, giving you that power to like communicate more effectively. And lastly, I put like omniscience. So this scene from The Matrix, that famous scene where he's like, oh, I don't just see code. I know that's like a woman, a blonde woman walking down the street and so forth. Like, imagine being able to kind of collectively have this knowledge of everything that's been going on and happening right now. So with all these devices gathering data, you can imagine being able to query information that you want to know right now, such as, hey, how long is the line at that restaurant, right now, like, or how long is it typically at this time if I leave now, and so forth. Being able to kind of have these, like really specific queries about the world, transcending kind of, literally space and time. So I want to just, this is the conclusion basically, there's a symbiosis between AR and AI. AR needs AI to understand our world and provide utility. But at the same time, AI benefits from that like rich, voluminous, and multimodal data that we capture from our perspective, and the two like strongly reinforce each other. AI makes AR more useful, and AR also, really lets AI do its best work serving us, and also becoming better in the process. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. These are my kind of social media links, and thanks again for having me on here.
Thanks to you for showing all of this here and to compile it into a very short amount of time. Once again, sorry to rush it, but this is so great, and I really appreciate that you put like at the end like a lot of real life use cases, which any one of those has a full probably group of a lot of startups that are concentrating on that problem. I feel like the all of the landscape of AR really changed and evolved like on some like kind of like niche use cases. So I like to see that. And now with AI, seems really like kind of rediscussing how this is gonna work somehow, like when it comes together. And like speaking of like you mentioned that AR and AI are some sort of like complementary entities in a way, because I think that just taking a look, for example, to the segmentation model that Facebook released, Segmented Anything, is basically understanding the surrounding, and there is a new model of interface which you kind of like indirectly reveal. It's like, for example, you're just looking at something, you're identifying something, you are not necessarily talking, but you're typing instead of typing buttons. Buttons lose a little bit of importance whenever you can, with your voice, achieve the same goals. And like there is a lot of speculation in this environment now, because what's going to happen next, right? For some, maybe not for the most complex task, but for very repetitive and very like common, seems like voice might be enough, or like text might be enough. With this note, I want to just introduce Chris, Rojas, which he's focusing actually on the making of an app that is called Shader. And correct me if I'm mistaking, if I'm doing any mistake in this presentation, but it seems like an AR application which is generating AR filters and more just with the use of voice commands like prompts, like a prompts interface. So it's something that goes beyond like the typical applications that we see, for example, with Spark AR or Unity or other things. This app starts as a prompt-based interaction. Chris in the past worked in companies like Meta, Microsoft, and he did a lot of work on XR prototyping. So a lot of like, I feel like the role of prototypers helped you to navigate a very broad spectrum of different features. Like you want to pick anything from everywhere because you just want to put it together for making the best product. So please go ahead, and this is the last guest, and then later after this one we will reserve some time for the audience questions.
Cool. Yeah, I think we might run out of time with the video. It looked like it said it was gonna be up in 10 minutes, but we'll see. Cool. All right, I'm gonna share. Let's just share this one window. Boop, boop, boop. So some of this is going to be repeat because we already heard a bit of it about generative AI and ControlNet and all that stuff. Let's just start. So can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, I'll just start with generative AI is very hot right now. I made this little animation just trying to get it to do some text and grow it out of some moss. So I gave it a prompt and generated some text out of just growing some moss. But you can do a lot of really fun, super amazing things with Stable Diffusion, but I'll just really quickly give you a little bit of my background. Worked at Oculus, Meta, worked on AR glasses there. There's no photos of it because it doesn't exist in the wild yet. Made a bunch of hardware and software prototypes, as well as a lot of machine learning based input and other AI tools. But I don't work there anymore. I started a company called Shader. Like you said earlier, we are making AR filters via prompts. So here you have a little video showing. I'm going to go pretty quick through this. There's a ton of generative AI companies. Like this is already very, very outdated, and this is from November 17th. It's kind of crazy how many have popped up in the last 6 months. Shader also started less than 6 months ago. And generative AI has just been moving at an incredible pace. You can see with Midjourney from V1 to V5, pretty drastic changes. Same with Stable Diffusion and DALL-E. But Stable Diffusion is kind of the big one that I think everyone who's a developer and prototyping really cares about, because the sources is available, has a super active community, lots of extensions. It's able to, you're able to easily train your own models. You can also use their web UI. And there's APIs that are constantly being added onto. You can run it locally. You don't have to run it just in the cloud. So you don't have to pay for it. Like with Midjourney, you can just run it on your own machine. It also runs on iOS and soon Android. And yeah, it's easy to integrate into a bunch of stuff. So people have made a couple different UI, just interfaces for Stable Diffusion. The most popular one is Automatic 1111. And then a new one that just came out is called Comfy UI. It's all node-based, which is pretty rad. You can check out a video on that from Olivio. But yeah, Automatic 1111 is kind of the standard right now, it seems. So that's the one I'm going to be talking about. Most of the time, people kind of know from Midjourney this text to image, and this is the interface for Automatic 1111. You just type in a prompt and hit generate. But There's also the negative prompt, which is not very apparent with Midjourney. You can use negative prompts, but it's a little more hidden. And then the big difference between Midjourney and Stable Diffusion is that it has checkpoints you can change. You can change the base model, I guess, of all the different images that it's been trained on. So that's a pretty big deal, because you can go for something that's very realistic, something that's more cartoonish, something that's specific to RPG type art. So you can have more finely controlled output of your images. So these different checkpoints, you can give it the exact same prompt, exact same seed, and you can see here the differences with Protogen Anime, with Dreamlike Diffusion, Open Journey, Synthwave, and Deliberate. So it does change the image quite a bit, even if you give it a very specific pose and everything. The other thing that is kind of newish to Midjourney is image to image. They've added this in there, but it's been there forever for Stable Diffusion. And that allows you to take an image and kind of go and make a new image from it. And you can kind of diffuse it to whatever amount that you want. Here's an example of going from the original image to from a young Bill Gates in a coffee shop in Seattle to a old, grumpier Bill Gates in a coffee shop in Seattle. And just seeing the weight go from a diffusion of 0 to 5 to 0.9. And then likewise here, this one is going from a older Bill Gates to a Bill Gates who has now been attacked by zombies in a post-apocalyptic horror film. And you can just see the dial kind of being cranked up here to almost 100% on the last one. But I think the thing that is most impressive about Stable Diffusion right now is that you can, and with a lot of these tools, is just being able to train your own model. We saw Lenza come out, and that's basically just the implementation of Stable Diffusion and getting your models generated. So you can train a model to have specific people or places or objects or styles or clothing or even locations. And you can download a bunch of these different trained models, either at like Hugging Face or at Civet AI. But the warnings, a bunch of these are not safe for work. People tend to train models that are a little, more risque there. But one of the best parts about Stable Diffusion is this wonderful little button in Automatic Level 11, which is kind of hidden. It shows you a preview of all the different LoRa's or textural inversions or different models you have trained that you can use, and kind of give you a preview. So you can just kind of click on one of these and say, oh, I want that style. I want to use this one. And that will drastically change your image. You can also upsample quite a lot. My GPU will let me go to about 8K resolution in images. But if you have cloud compute, or if you have a more powerful GPU, more RAM, you could probably go even higher. Kind of walk through a bunch of the steps of that, but we're going to jump into some other things. There's another nice feature of Stable Diffusion that is kind of better than Midjourney is like you don't have this like guessing game of what is my prompt and what did I do and all this. Like you have a lot more control. So you can use the image browser, and that will allow you to look at all the images that you've created. You can see the prompt, you can see all the settings, and then you can load it into your text to image or image to image or in Paint or whatever other areas you want to work with the images. There's also a ton of extensions that you can download. If you go to the extensions tab in Stable Diffusion, you can just go to available and then load from, and it will load all these in, and you can just install right away. You can have a 3D model loader. So if you want to drop that in and use it with ControlNet, that's very useful. ControlNet, like Bilawal said, is like it's the hot new thing as of a couple months ago. It allows you to really control your images, and this is a really big deal for Stable Diffusion. Allow you to go from your original image to Gollum to a bunch of like Lord of the Rings characters, and we get all the different maps that he kind of mentioned before. You have the depth, canny, normals, head segmentation. I'll put head in there twice. And these allow you to very easily fine tune your image or control your image. Another fun one that came out a while back too is the scribble mode. It also is using ControlNet, and you can just give it any scribble and then adjust the weights. So here you can see it like a weight of 1.0. You know, this is again young Bill Gates in a coffee shop. I'm from Seattle, so he's my victim for today's talk. His shoulders are matching this illustration, how it's not very proportionate, as the weight is like a 1.0. And then as you kind of scale it back, he becomes more human and more realistic looking based on the prompt. So this is super useful for doing like a rough sketch and getting a nice composition. Definitely useful in AR as well. This image that I showed earlier is also just messing with the weights. It's just creating a video and literally just changing the weight from 0 to 1 slowly over time and giving it more and more input from ControlNet and less from the prompt. You can also use this to kind of like transfer styles. I trained a model of myself. I trained one of Pedro Pascal from the show Last of Us, just because it was amusing and I wanted to try training it on somebody. You can see it also kind of took his flannel shirt that he wears in the show and applied it to the scene. You can also do color correction with Stable Diffusion. Just give it a base image. This is kind of where we have some overlap with AR. So you can use Stable Diffusion within Unity. There's a couple different implementations. I like Kaijiro's. It's using a local Stable Diffusion build, and it can run on iOS. It can run on a Mac. It is meant for Apple Silicon. So this is just running locally. So if you build an app with this, then you don't actually have to charge any like cloud compute. It could run locally, which is very nice for users. But it is slower. So that's the downside. There's another version, Dobrato's Unity integration that allows you to do materials like tileable materials, as well as just image generation and then text to text. And this is using a local Stable Diffusion build. So if you have it running locally, you can just run it for yourself. Or if you set this up in the cloud, you will have to like, you know, connect it to your cloud server and make that work. Tons and tons of APIs. I don't think we have a lot of time to go into this today. But you can basically do everything that you can do with the UI just through the APIs. If you scroll down to the automatic 1111 interface at the very bottom, you'll see this little API button that'll tell you all the different APIs, and it updates as you add more extensions and modules. So it's a very helpful documentation, and you can also try it out in the documentation live and just start typing in prompts and making stuff. So very, very useful. And here's just a little preview of one of the pieces of the app that I'm building called Shader, being able to generate a bunch of 3D AR scenes and then compose them and then generate imagery that way. That's just one little piece of it. But here you have these fancy cars on the right, but really it's just a little cheap, you know, free 3D model that was on the Unity Asset Store and placed in my kitchen next to a backsplash, and then just giving it a prompt that it's an ad for some fancy supercar. There's a bunch of issues that we kind of like gloss over, like the generative AI ethics. Stable Diffusion is based off of the Lion data set, which uses copyrighted images. Hopefully, as an industry, we can get past this. I feel like Adobe's doing a very good job with Firefly. They are using their stock imagery to make a new base for Stable Diffusion. And I feel like a lot of companies are going to have to do this in the future, and then be pretty open about where they got their images for this to continue to grow as an industry, because otherwise it's just going to be shamed, and it's going to be harder for companies to grow without a clean base for Stable Diffusion to generate images off of that aren't just scraped off the internet, or actually from some stock or some more legitimate source. So if you have any questions, you can scan this QR code. It links to this deck, and then you have all these links here you can click on, and here's my socials if you would like. And that's it.
I just wanted to make sure you guys have amazing presentation. Is there, we can share maybe like a PDF or something on the Discords, or any like extract of it would be amazing. I don't know what you can share or what you cannot share. That would be super cool to have it in the Discord, or Norman's Discord or mine, both. I mean, as you prefer, or you can also just send it to me, whatever you would like to share. I think this is super valuable, because I think Bilawal, like you said something right, like this presentation would have been an amazing introduction, because it kind of presents a large variety of tools that are the tools that everyone is using now. So this is the stuff that you just, like, if you're trying to make something, you just go on internet and you're just gonna run into these things. Hugging Face, something I've been using also a lot, and I find it super valuable because they kind of abstract a little bit more the work for you and makes it a very easy way to implement things for your project. So that's very nice. So yeah, we are at the end of this talk. So I just want to say, first of all, a round of applause to all of the speakers. You guys are just amazing. So I leave it to the audience now. I know that the meeting ends at 7:30. I'm down also to extend a little bit more, because also the respect of you guys giving exhaustive answer and explain more. So please, if there is anyone that has a question, raise your hand now and let's get into it. Otherwise, I have a lot of questions there. Is there anyone? Or you can also write the question if you're shy.
There's a question that Bart had. Is there a version of ControlNet that is usable on iOS? Somebody made an app called Draw Things. I don't know if you guys have seen this. It runs on iOS, and it is basically all the things that you see in Stable Diffusion in an app, and it runs locally. So there's no charge. It's just a free app. And so if you want to try different checkpoints, you want to try ControlNet, you want to try a bunch of things, you can do it just right on your phone, and it's free.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm actually really interested in what you were saying, Bart, because in my experience, I work for a non-XR industry, right? And I've kind of been, over the last few months, been kind of getting a little bit burnt out, just because over 3 years, I've produced like 12 different prototypes, both in the field of virtual reality and augmented reality, trying to find ways to use and leverage these technologies for a global corporation, right? Like a corporation that is not entertainment focused or is not inherently XR focused. And what I've noticed is that so much of the form factor is the issue. If people don't want to wear it, they're not going to use it. And I actually looked into a projector system called Light Guide that would like project down augmented reality visuals, and that was one of the few things I got people interested in. So I guess my question to you, Bart, because you were the one just talking about this, but if anyone else who was presenting wants to chime in, what do you guys see is kind of like the next step in regards to providing value outside of the world of like digital entertainment and video games? And I'm thinking more like customer service, retail employees, things like that.
That's a really good question. And I did kind of neglect those use cases in my presentation. Those are very valuable ones. I think like actually Alessio might be able to speak more, because like Magic Leap is actually, I think really the dominant player in like the transparent AR and for like serious use cases that are session based and so forth. To be honest, I haven't given a lot of thought to like non-consumer use cases. I know they're there. What's going to like deliver value first is a really kind of hard question to answer, because since HoloLens in 2016, right, they really pushed the enterprise use cases pretty hard. And it's kind of odd because like I just don't really have a good to be honest, like lay of the land there, because they, you know, there's been all these like fancy announcements and demos and companies claiming that they're using them. And like, you know, you had like, what is it? Was it like, I think it was either like Japan Airlines or Toyota or both that had ordered a bunch of HoloLens, and they claimed they were actually using them for like maintenance and so forth. That this was here to stay. But then, you know, the program kind of collapsed. So I guess that wasn't enough to like really keep the HoloLens afloat. So it's always kind of like, you kind of have to really wait and see how useful it really is. But I do think that, you know, some of these like, you know, factory and maintenance use cases like make a lot of sense. And, you know, but yeah, again, like form factor, right? I would hate to be, well, first of all, I hate to be an Amazon warehouse worker. It sounds awful, but imagine doing something like that with like a HoloLens on your face. I think Magic Leap now has a much better form factor, and it's getting even better probably if, you know, if they do the next iteration. You know, Vuzix has been around like forever. Yeah, I don't know. Like, again, some of these things have been out for a very long time. And like, again, I don't work in like that kind of setting. I don't work on factory floors. I have very little understanding of that space, to be honest. But just anecdotally, I just don't really, it doesn't seem like there's been an explosion yet. So I don't know exactly where the, you know, problem is. I suspect it has a lot to do with like, yeah, the screen, you know, the actual like resolution, like the Vuzix are like monocular, one eye, right? That's their compromise. You know, having that really good computer vision accessible in that form factor with stable tracking. I think there's, you know, it's like there's a lot of like little things to get right. I don't know, maybe someone else can chime in, like maybe Alessio or someone who knows maybe a little bit more about some of these like non-consumer applications. What do you think is going to be the big one to be disrupted? Is there something that's like, you know, almost ready to be disrupted that we haven't talked about?
Well, I just want to mediate, bring you to the next question. I think that generally it really depends what's your point of view in defining something disruptive. Like for me, disrupting is also, for example, you know, you go to the optician and you do like an exam for, you know, for your eyeballs, and you need to go through a lot of different steps. And I don't know, this is really not closely related to Magic Leap, but if you ever worked with that headset, also the Magic Leap 1 would just allow you to get a lot of data out of your, you know, eyes, for example, position. It would just give you a lot, it can provide you a lot of data regarding the user. And so kind of, you know, those are become valuable in that specific setting. Or now Magic Leap is doing some remote rendering things. They are targeting also dentistry, so healthcare providers, and you see this happening very much right now, specifically in some fields, very slowly, but disrupting like those industries first. I think that as much as I want to see these things happening more often, it seems like things are moving very quickly, very slowly, sorry, and in a very specific niche that has been defined now. So the form factor, unfortunately, is very determining of that because you cannot wear that every day, and we all know it. But the thing that you can do with it, it's pretty incredible. And the fact that now we have these latest AI developments that allow us to do things with, you know, way less power than before. Or, you know, like a lot of cloud solution that could help to reduce form factors could be also a direction that now is taken more than before. So I just want to give more space to all of the other questions too. So if there is any follow-up, please keep going on the Discord. I think it's very active. There are a lot of, you know, 300 more members that all work and wants to work in AR. So Mayan asks, so what is your guys' take on the current abilities of creating a realistic looking 3D model of a real life object using AI prompts? So who want to take this one?
I could start. I'm sure other people will, you know, chime in. I think there's a couple paths, right? Like I think the NeRF path is probably the best, like proven path right now for generating high quality meshes from real objects. But I think like what it was shown earlier, you know, you can start to add stable diffusion on top of that. I think there's there's this kind of like gray zone of like, you need some sort of base to start with to start generating good quality content. So if you are just trying to make a bunch of boxes that look really detailed, like, we got you. Like, that's easy. Like, because you can just texture map those, and you can generate meshes or textures, and that's pretty straightforward. But when you start to do like really complex geometry that has a lot of intricate textures and things, it's going to be much harder to generate from a prompt. This paper I just shared in the chat, it's called differentiable sign distance function rendering. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of like growing out the object with sign distance fields, I imagine, or something similar, but kind of combining with some more stable diffusion like methods. So it's kind of funky cross blends between different types of technology. Bilawal, did you have something? I feel like you had some expertise here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to add to what you said, I think there's a lot of potential for you to do your base modeling, whatever you're doing, and then using things like, you know, the depth control net stuff we talked about to project textures from different viewpoints and match that stuff together. There's some really cool plugins for Blender that people are using just to do exactly that, almost like kit bashing textures together. And then on the text to 3D side, there is this paper called Dream Fusion, and there's like a new iteration of that came out too. So the closest thing I've seen to like a product that you could get access to is what Luma's done. So they've implemented basically Dream Fusion. And I mean, like, it's okay for certain types of results. Like for objects, it kind of works. But again, like, these models don't know about, like, they don't understand like the semantic context of what they're recreating. So you'll get like really funky, weird errors. Like clearly Elon's got some like long ass legs here. He's trying to do this like G.I. Joe type character, and like, okay, this is pretty usable. But again, like, is this mesh something that you just like, maybe for a prototype, you throw this into Mixamo and rig it and start doing some fun stuff with it? But like, this ain't production ready just yet, right? So you can do some really cool results. I think, like, let's see, I enjoyed the Steve Jobs one. This is kind of fun. Maybe I'll end on this one. It's like kind of holding a freaking phone up and just had like kind of the glasses and stuff on. So
legs.
Yeah, like if you want to make like a monster, I think you'll get some good results out of it. But again, like the moment you start getting into the details of the digits and all of that, like, you know, best of luck. So again, I expect text to 3D to advance, both for like objects, kind of outside in recreations where, like, again, they didn't even use any like, you know, 3D training data. This is all just using stable diffusion effectively. So it'll be cool to see where this goes. But I would say it's a nice toy right now. And the real fun is happening in the image space. And then, of course, just if you think about modalities, image is the most important. Then's video, because video is ubiquitous. And then you'll start seeing 3D stuff sort of showing up. And a lot of the problems for video may get solved by needing some sort of intermediate 3D representation too. But, you know, photo, video, and 3D in that order is kind of how I'm expecting this thing to start getting more production ready, if you will.
Thank you. Like always, if you guys want to follow up with more detailed question, resources, sharing, Discord, the right place to be. Luis, please go ahead.
Yes, I had a question about like, I know Magic Leap created like a character called Mika, which is using like AI, I think also. And I was wondering if you'll see like in the future, like through the AR glasses, like a character like Mika on our like daily, like answering questions, and is there like a way we can like do that? Or
I mean, I speak for Magic Leap, but I was not there at that time, so I didn't work on that project at all. And it was done in a moment where ChatGPT was not released, so I doubt that they used anything similar to that. I experienced, though, an assistant at the MIT Reality Hackathon that was done very, very well with ChatGPT. And I had like a 20 minutes conversation with this thing, and it was like, if I didn't know there was an agent, I would have just kept going. So yeah, this is my, I don't know, like, I see other follow-up question. I want to give space to the speaker. What do you guys think about, use of AI assistants in this kind of like AR realm. Please go ahead.
There's already a bunch of companies doing this. I feel like it's already here. We're here now. So it's just a matter of like, which one do you want? Is it a service? Is it like integrated into your specific thing? And so they're out there. I would look. Unfortunately, I don't know them by name, but there's definitely a bunch of companies they're doing this right now.
Yeah, I think it's especially big in games. Maybe not technically an assistant, but if you were at GDC this year, you'd see that there were like on the expo floor, I think there were like at least a couple companies that were doing this kind of stuff. One had a demo, and it was pretty fun actually. So yeah, it is, again, yeah, it's kind of doable now. But to specifically like regarding AR glasses, I'm not sure. Like I haven't really tried ever really, to be honest, like a demo of like a humanized kind of assistant and what that would feel like. I think that on the MR type headsets, that would be absolutely doable. Even today, I mean, you could definitely prototype this on the Quest Pro like today. But I wonder about, so AR, again, kind of going with the light, it depends on kind of how AR evolves. My bet though is that because of the power limitations of like what an AR like all day kind of wearable or long-term multi-hour wearable would be, that the answer would be probably no, because I think that for a couple reasons. Number one, it's like, even if it is an interface that you want, just the power requirements of like rendering like an object like that are pretty big. With like properly spatialized and all that stuff, it's just, I think, not really an efficient use of the headset. But secondly, as cool as it would be, you gotta have to kind of think about like, would you actually want that all day long? Like, do you really want like a holographic character with you? Like maybe some people do, but I think that as fun as it is, like, because all these demos that we try in AR, we've all tried them like for minutes at a time, right? Basically, like none of us have really done probably AR for hours continuously at a time. We think we know what we want, but I think that in reality, like for kind of, you can go around your day, you probably want, it's kind of a less is more thing. Like, it's kind of like with communication, how sci-fi authors predicted, video phones and all that stuff. And that stuff exists right now, like with FaceTime, but most of our communication is still, we just want to send a text or, get like an audio message, or imagine having someone like an assistant is there, or maybe like ends up as a visual, but not as a humanoid, just some like light augmentation, I think would probably be less distracting. Because there's also that distraction issue. Like I remember like once doing an experiment with something really simple where it's just like rendering like a little sphere or something. And there's just something about like that AR visual that like you just can't take your eyes off of it. And when you're walking around, it's actually pretty distracting. And no matter how like minimalistic I tried to make it, it was like still kind of annoying to have it there. Maybe not annoying, but like it was just like really tough to like not notice it and focus on it for some reason. So yeah, I don't know. I think just because of the power constraints, and again, what you might want is like to be present and not be overloaded with that sensory stuff, especially if you like you need assistance in the moment. You might not want like visuals kind of cluttering your information space, I think. So I'd be skeptical if you see it in AR glasses, but again, you could definitely do it on MR devices, and there could very well be utility to have that sort of like humanoid type character to talk to. And I'm excited to see it happen on like the current and upcoming MR headsets, because they're totally able to do it like right now today.
I mean, the only thing I'd just say to that is, I mean, again, I agree that the avatar bit is probably a bit, far out right now, but, assistants in general, and again, I'm tooting my own horn here, of course, but, I think they are going to be super, super interesting. And a lot of the interest, again, we were talking about enterprise scenarios for this, we have had tons and tons of companies reach out to us to say, can we make a personalized version of this for our company? So, a well-known airline that we're working with at the moment that wants to give this to their passengers, for instance. And these things, by the way, you can wear for hours and hours and hours and hours at a time. So, this ability to be able to call up information like, where am I supposed to be going? When's the flight? When's this? When's that? That kind of assistant, I think, will be super interesting. But it wouldn't necessarily be an avatar. It might just be text. But that ability to call on it at any time is super interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, we prototyped something like this at HoloLens with Cortana for the HoloLens, but I don't think it made it. Just the, It did have.
Away them for hours on end. Again, back to Bart's point. You've got to fix that first. You've got to find.
It's not a high. Yeah, it's not a high priority if your headset is over 100 grams.
Sometimes what you think is the best solution, it might be like testing it every day. You discover like all of the nuances. Like it's, you know, like usually from my experience, when there is such a radical idea that comes out, it's never probably the one. It's a good starter, it's a good lead, but it's just like it kind of finds a lot of differentiation until kind of stabilize. But you know, they want to take more time. Douglas, please go ahead.
But yeah, so you know, I was at Magic Leap starting from January of 2014, and actually I helped build the deep learning team, as well as now I'm currently leading a generative AI research team at Magic Leap. But so I can tell you a bit. Like I didn't work directly on Mica, but I did sort of work on essentially all of the deep learning optimization for ML1 to make that possible. Right? So those models are literally like 3 orders of magnitude more efficient than the state-of-the-art models from circa 2017. But so if generative AI had existed in anything close to its current form, then Mica would have been incredible. John Manos's team in Culver City, so he had like an amazing team. John Manos has an Academy Award in motion capture and human modeling. It was an amazing piece of technology. They spent years building it. It's really kind of a shame because basically her mind really was a mirage. It didn't exist. But her physical form was phenomenal. And frankly, because we kind of, you know, we sort of pivoted away from that. And so we probably couldn't like resuscitate Mica if we wanted to, but it was a technological tour de force. And I have to say, it's really a shame that it didn't coincide with generative AI because it would be a mind-blowing demo.
Yeah, I saw some videos, and it kind of like, I feel like Magic Leap has a history of like amazing art that has been built in the past, and I think that like, I don't know, like seeing things that move very like naturally and all of that stuff that they made in the past, the content for the platform was very, very, very high quality, even if maybe didn't make
it was awesome because they had some of the best luminaries from video games, comic books, like visual effects. So they had like an amazing combination of experts from so many different fields, including again like entertainment fields, things that you don't normally find in sort of like, you know, extremely technology focused companies, maybe more something like Pixar, right, where you see like you have all these experts across medical sciences, across visual effects, movies, you know, just you know, we had John Gaeta, right, who did the special effects for The Matrix, right, so we just had you know, very extremely, you know, across science fiction, all kind of eclectic, just luminaries, right? It was pretty amazing, but it was way before its time, and you know, rest in peace, Mica.
Anyone that wants to chime in for a question, I see that, I don't know if please go ahead if you have a question now. I don't know, maybe I lost some on the chat. Okay, I see here Marco. Thanks for all the internet with the Alberto conversation. Or does anyone feel this is kind of related? Threat to public health, since we can still generate realistic character in AR. I think this is kind of related to the conversation we had. It's like it's already there, like Chris pointed out. It's just up to us how to use it. We will see if it's something that, you know, like I feel like, you know, we can claim that ChatGPT is like an everyday use. I think most of us, I don't know if you guys have a chance to use it in your workflow, but I use it outside of my work for some, you know, side fun projects, and I have to say it's helpful. It's like it's on my bookmarks, and I think it's the condition that a lot of other people have, and it just like speeds up your development, definitely. And it's also kind of like, what I want to mention is that it creates a sort of addiction to what you want to accomplish, because you're kind of like finding solution based on like your constant answer and understanding more about this thing. Could be dangerous. Yeah, saves you time, more productivity. People will always probably choose that path. So it's kind of like a pros and cons situation, but there are still more pros for now. Anyone else that want to chime in for some other points? Or I think I have a personal question.
I've got one more final personal question, not strictly AR related, but out of interest, how long will photo and videographic evidence be permitted in court? Or how much longer, rather? How much longer will photographic and videographic evidence be admissible in court?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of detection algorithms to kind of help that along. So you can actually like detect, has this been generated by AI? There's also a lot of like really funky artifacts. And yeah, like Photoshop already exists. Like people have been able to fake these things forever. It's just, yeah.
But it'll get perfect, right? I think. I feel like by the end of the year, we would like easily be shattering the visual Turing test. Like you won't be able to tell what's real, what's not. Already, like it's like every single thing. People are like, oh, well, the hands kind of look wonky, fixed. The teeth fixed, the eyes fixed, and on and on and on. But I think it'll just turn into like the new version of like dealing with 0-day exploits and vulnerabilities in software, right? Like we're always patching these things, like, and it'll be kind of like whack-a-mole. It's like, you know, you build a discriminator that can detect synthetic content, and you use the discriminator to build a generator that can like bypass that, and that'll just be like this constant thing. But I think it's solvable. And who knows, maybe you'll have to like capture a NeRF as the gold standard of what's real, and then you know you'll have text to NeRF, and then we just keep going to the next more complex canvas, you know, that has all the forensic evidence to it. But yeah, it's like it's such an interesting question. Though I don't worry about this as much as I do about, like, I don't know, multimodal GPT-4 being out in the wild. Like that stuff scares me, and it's way beyond just like solving CAPTCHAs. Like that can get scary quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's, I mean, again, it is kind of like a runaway positive feedback loop or negative if you want to think about it. But right now, there's no way from, you know, low resolutions that you could generate, for instance, you know, like basically if we basically computed an iris code, certainly from high resolution images, you're not going to generate that. In fact, generative AI art currently now has trouble even generating eyes that don't have artifacts where you could say like that's clearly wrong. But in terms of actual iris code, no way, right? Like, but of course, you know, then would you say, well, we'll just generate that, right? And so, you know, as long as you have high resolution images of someone's eyes, you know, that you could probably create a model that could create like, that's a really, really good eye if it could do that, right? But again, we would just like, again, up the game and say like, okay, well, we'll compute like, you know, some sort of, you know, steganography or something like where you know, we computed some secret. We'd have to have a secret as to what the mask is for the retinal or the iris features. But it's a nuclear war. There's no way to sort of say, you know, people will break the code. But yeah, I think that's so there. I think it's a bit questionable. It would be like eyewitness testimony. Right? We still have eyewitness testimony, right? Even though we know eyewitnesses are really unreliable.
Yeah, maybe that's why Sam Altman has the eyeball scanning startup, right? That's like how you authenticate your human. So maybe we'll all just. That's one way, like, to figure out, is a human, like, you know, how do you detect what's generated, like, and what kind of an agent even is like a human agent versus like, yeah, like some bot doing your bidding. You know, I think it's gonna be a wild future. I do think about how that can easily delve into, to go back to the prior question about like the good and bad of this stuff. I think there's absolutely bad, right? Like I think Alessio did a great PR trained job of like handily walking the line there, but like it is worth thinking about. Like there are apps like character.ai, right? And they tend to have longer session lengths, at least based on what they're saying publicly. And is there a world in which like we're just all like, you know, like a subset of the population? Like it's not the dystopian, you know, I don't know, like science fiction VR, you know, world of choice. It's just like people are dating chatbots and not like reproducing naturally. Like I think that could be that, you know, that could crater population rate certainly. And so it's like interesting to think about like how this technology is becoming an even more like the disparity between the good and the bad that you can do with it. It's like just even more pronounced. And so like I don't think it's been like that with AR VR tech, right? It just wasn't that powerful. I think like generative AI is like this, we're at this like, yeah, like if somebody goes and looks at the irises and can tell the stuff, but that's like most people are just scrolling through crap on Twitter all day to the disinfo potential without any of that verification, unless it's at the platform level, could do a lot of harm, you know? But then again, you can tell stories like as a 12-year-old using tools that only like James Cameron had access to. So what a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I mean, we've grappled with these kind of questions in like the AR field. Like if you're actually making AR glasses that are all day wearable and you actually expect people to wear them all day, so many ethics questions come up. Like when do you allow the cameras to turn on? Like when is the mic on? Like how much do you use the eye tracking to see what people are looking at in the real world? And like, do you check? Like, do you use that for advertising? And like all of this stuff is going to be like magnified when AR and AI really collide in consumer products in a few years. That's just, man, that's going to be, that'll be fun.
Can I actually interject a question here for Dan? Like, since y'all are talking about subtitling speech, right? Like the next natural step is to index kind of like what Chris is saying, like all the documents you read, the books that you're reading, all the things you saw, so you can sort of conjure up, you know, that wisp of an idea that you have, kind of make much more sense of it. What do you think is gonna, like, how do y'all think about the North Star in terms of that experience beyond the subtitles? Like what's next? What's the next paradigm?
I mean, yeah, it is all about multimodal, and today it's just audio. And, you know, it's mainly because these glasses that we're using don't have cameras. And it also helps, you know, to your point, Chris, we don't even want to open up that hornet's nest right now. But, you know, there are glasses coming out very soon that do have cameras. And so very soon we will be able to do multimodal. And so we'll be able to do it for increased accuracy, for instance, because we can now start to do lip reading. We'll be able to do it for subtitle placement, so we can figure out who's talking and put subtitles next to them. You, of course, can then immediately go one step further and then start to, you know, hey, X-ray, can you describe the scene that I'm in? And it will then start to, you know, provide an audio commentary of what's around you. And yeah, it goes on and on and on. And then you're into this whole, you know, data privacy nightmare. And again, you know, we've been so clear, you know, we are Web3, we are decentralized, users own the data, we just license a piece of software to them, it's up to them what they do with it, nothing to do with us. We don't even have a backend, like we don't even see any of this data. So, you know, that's the approach that we've taken, which again is the same kind of approach that, you know, if I was walking around with a mobile recording a video of everyone, it's no different, really. You know, I'm responsible for getting consent from everyone around me. And if someone has a problem with me videoing them, they come and say, can you delete that recording, please? And I go, sure, no problem. And so, again, we've just taken that same model with this. And that's why, again, there's another thing that we think which is going to blur into all of this, which is Web3, because we think the only way any of this is going to be possible is with decentralized ownership of data. You know, to your point, Chris, this just won't work if anybody else has access to this data in any other than a really controlled way, because then everyone's going to start getting shirty about it. Whereas if the data is owned by the user and the only person that has access to that data ever is the user, then we think that's a good starting place for this conversation. Sorry, it was a long answer. Hopefully made some amount of sense.
It's a great answer, yeah.
I think I feel like the discussion is like who's taking a stand again in this conversation. Like what are the opinion of people? Like who's gonna be able to, like what I notice is that every time I see these models and all of these implications, seems like most of the time you really don't have control over what is happening. So there is no control. and of course this is kind of scaring people in a way, and it also making you think like we are not aware of the exponential scale of how this is gonna develop. It's hard to imagine. So I think that all of these conversations that I think are fair, that are happening now, and you know, like it's in some position, really, for me, it's like in the position that some people are, it's hard to take measurements beside exploring the tools. I had like a question that is more like it's more related to the content that we do in our Discord, in my Discord, but it's also for you guys because you've been for a while in the field, and seems like all of you kind of worked in big tech and then went out of big tech and did kind of your own thing and made your own version of the facts that really kind of you care about. So I wonder if someone is watching this conversation today and is like, you know, just out of school or just like starting to study in this kind of AI wave. Just imagine a kid like today just start education and it's like 14, 15 or like 20 starting college, and you just see what's happening now. Now, like, how would you think your role could be more impactful in this landscape that is happening now? Do you feel like as a creator and as an independent creator, like analyzing these tools helps you a lot? Do you feel like you would?
Yeah, I mean, can I go first real quick? Yeah, I think like the advice like for someone that young really is to like have a good, you know, to establish some sort of a core value system that can guide you, because that's kind of the bedrock of, you know, who you are and how you're going to approach the really unpredictable changes that are kind of, you know, going to always be propagating through society and possibly now at an accelerating rate. And I think that, you know, developing yourself as a, like, I wish you know, if I had a chance to do it all over again, I would have developed myself more as a more multifaceted person in terms of the arts and so forth. And, you know, having things like that, that you really care about, so that technology really becomes a tool as opposed to, you know, so a means to an end as opposed to like the end itself. So I think that, yeah, just kind of really, I think that's like the kind of key thing. And just, you know, from my time, you know, I kind of came from a very technical background, and like from my time at Apple, it was interesting to kind of really be able to, at a professional level, work with people that, you know, were artists and had a much more artistic side and so forth. And I definitely see the value in that. So I think, you know, having that like consistent like having a value system that you really care about, so you know what to do with this technology, and, you know, having interests that are beyond just whatever the current fad is today, are especially really, really important. You know, I think like the hyper specialization that the education systems kind of funnel people into is going to be a really, really bad idea for a lot of people, because we can't predict what the industry is going to look like in 5 years, let alone like, you know, 10, 20 years from now. You have to just be a generalist and you know, yeah, essentially like, you know, have things that you want to do besides just create the tools themselves, so that you know how to, when like whatever tool becomes available, you're able to actually apply it to something that you care about.
I would +1 that. Generalist all the way. Like, yeah, it's like, I think the days of hyper specialization are gone. Like, what was that like trendy term everyone loves? Like, figure out your like T shape, like where you're broad and where you want to go deep. I think like, given that AI can make a bunch of generalist specialists now, I think like tasting more things is so much better than like, I don't know, like maybe there's still a world where you want to go do like the hypergalactic focused PhD on like computer vision, where you know like just like the apex of what you need to know in a space. But where things are going, I feel like generalists will thrive the most, and probably, to your point, keep you most sort of resilient to the change that lies ahead. I do think like it is a good question if like you're just graduating college, whether you should go join like a big tech company, a startup, and all of that. I think like earlier in your career, there's a lot of value to doing that. It'd be interesting to see how the landscape looks in like another decade. But if the market is like, if history is any sign, you'll end up with a couple of large players that'll kind of be the tanker ships, and then they'll eventually start becoming far more slow moving. That'll always leave space for like the pirate ships and the speedboats, right? And so do you want to be on a speedboat or do you want to be on a tanker ship? I think like, gosh, the type of stuff I've been able to do and the data sets I've been able to play with at Google, I don't think I could have done there anywhere else. Like, where else can you launch like, you know, a geospatial API or like a VPS service like that has a digital twin for like 100 countries? You just can't do that type of stuff anywhere else, right? And so I think there's always going to be a space for that. And I think earlier in your career, there's a lot of value to going and working in these like sort of large tankers, because that's like a microcosm, like in a freaking universe in itself. And you could just spend like, 4 or 5, 6 years there, just like exploring a bunch of really interesting things and going deep on an area. And you'll learn far more than you would, I don't know, like I'm a product manager. So like a lot of people ask me, should I go to business school? My answer is like, please, no, for the love of God, don't go to business school. Just go be a PM at a freaking startup or a tech company, whatever you want. Like, just don't go do that. So I think like, it'll be interesting to see how the landscape changes, but oh my God, be a generalist and like figure out like, kind of not just like the topics that you're interested in, but the kind of things you want to do day to day. And like, if you like working in a far more like empowered to work as a generalist yourself, in which case a startup is probably the better thing to go. Or if you want to go explore like an area like geospatial, then there's like a handful of places you probably want to go deep into something like that.
Yeah, the best advice I ever get was to ignore the vast majority of the advice that you ever get, because who knows? And the world genuinely changed last year, and I think honestly, like none of us have any idea is the reality. Like we don't know how this technology is going to, take over the world. Because
ask GPT-5, Dan. That's where you'll get the answers.
Of course, he knows the answer. He already knows the answer. But listen, life will find a path for you, I'm sure. Just go with what feels best.
Thank you for, everything that you showed. I really just leave it for, I noticed that there is a common ground between all of this answer, and it's the fact that it's good to be up to date with what is happening. And in any capacity, if you have the chance to explore what is happening, do it. Because I really noticed that who is not into like being curious couldn't have this sort of discussions that we're having. So curiosity first, and like it's so important to have. And yeah, I agree that ultra specialization it's helpful, but just in specific use case. And I noticed that being in an early stage of career, having like a foot in every door seems like very valuable. If you guys want to close with any other questions, even I just want to leave the space to everyone here in this call. Otherwise, we can just wrap it up. And please, I don't want to end the call. I would just want to let it end to some speakers here.
I got a question. I don't have it closed, but I have one last question that I'm just curious about. Maybe it's for like Bart. And I'm actually curious what Chris has to say, and Dan, actually. It's like, so, AR, VR kind of had this like dream of like the Jarvis type, like helpful, always on assistant that's in the background, knows your context and all of that. And so sort of now like the marginal cost of, so initially my mental model was this will be like mobile. We'll see these like best practices emerge. And we certainly have seen most of like the pass through AR apps adopt those for like world facing or like selfie facing AR. Now that like generative AI has made the, incremental cost of building like any kind of code, like pretty much zero, what's going to happen to like interfaces? Is it going to be like disposable interfaces? And it's like a GUI, a graphical user interface here, and then like a language user interface there. And sort of like, there's no standards. It's all just like sort of tailored to your unique needs. Like, how do you see human computer interaction evolving in this like confluence of generative AI and spatial computing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's going to be disposable interfaces, because I think the user experience is still going to matter a lot. Like, people can make these disposable interfaces. I saw a bunch of like AI hackathons and stuff, and they just whip out some crap web page, and you're like, oh yeah, it is a web page. It does do the things, but you need a lot more design. And I think the more complicated the tool is, the thing that people are using, you want to have users to like know your tool, to understand it, to not have it change all the time. It's like going from Blender to Maya or something, if there's any 3D artists out there. Like it's hell to go and relearn a whole new interface. So I could see disposable interfaces in that sense, where you're like, oh, I don't know this tool at all, and I want it to be like this other tool. Can you make it like that tool? Because I know that one really well, and I don't know this other one over here. And just like that interpretation could be very useful as like a disposable interface. But yeah.
It's funny, one of the bits of feedback that or pushback that we quite often get is, oh my God, your app is so simple. Like, I could write that in like 3 hours. You're like, oh, well, good one. Like, try. And again, I often say, sometimes, to do the most simple thing, particularly well, is actually incredibly difficult. And, that comes down to like good interface design. And, if I could just get ChatGPT to write an app for me, then, happy days. But it's not quite that straightforward. And I still don't think it's be quite that straightforward for a long time to come, because there is beauty in interface design and user experience. And it's just, I think we're a long way from teaching machines that. So I think there is still going to be, craft in what we do for a while to come, I think.
Yeah, I think that's, I pretty much agree. I mean, I think that like there's just like a big kind of cognitive benefit to having standardized interfaces. So I guess the industry kind of goes through these like experiments of like, phases of experimentation and then like standardization, right? And maybe but I do think, like, to your point, that we are probably, with all this stuff, we're probably on the cusp of like a phase of experimentation where things will get kind of wacky for a while, and then we'll kind of then maybe some of the best practices we have now will be reconfigured. But I do think they'll eventually be kind of like this is like the accepted way to do things, because like this is how other tools do it, and therefore there's less like cognitive load to do that. And that I think even applies to like, how maybe you interact with something with voices or so forth, so forth. So but I think that at the same time, though, there's I do think there's opportunity to experiment. I think there will be some changes. I'm curious to see how it goes. I'm a little bit worried, to be honest, because like for example, like I like Windows. Actually, I'm a Windows person, and I like it as an OS. I think it's been getting worse for sure, but I find that it's like the right kind of, it lets me, if I want to be a coder and kind of geek out, I can do that. It just kind of works really well. I think they've done a lot of things right, despite their best efforts to destroy it. And I'm a little bit hesitant about this. Now Microsoft is like gung ho on AI, and they're going to make like Windows a GPT based OS, and I think that could be really dangerous. But I think it'll end up somewhere in like a happy medium. And also I think, but like I do wonder if there's like going to be this like emergence of kind of really bespoke things. People have tried that before, right? There was like that website, if this then that, being able to kind of create your own pipelines for applications and your own really custom bespoke stuff. I know like with AR especially, a lot of people feel that there isn't a killer app, but which is kind of a problem. But maybe there's like a lot of small apps that are like individual use cases, and maybe LLMs as like an orchestrator for that makes sense. Like yesterday, like a few days ago, thought hit me. I posted this on Twitter, like that. Maybe LLMs will be like microprocessors to circuit design, where like a lot of bespoke circuits don't get built anymore. You just like grab a processor, even though it's like more power. It's like kind of a heavy solution, but it's like conceptually more elegant, and also reconfigurable, all that stuff. But it's just like a lot easier to like just write code to blink something rather than like trying to build some freaking like tuned circuit to do it. So I wonder if like that might impact things, where we have like standardized interfaces, but then a lot of like configurability, and so we have some new way of expressing that for people. I don't know. I think it'll like kind of widen out and then narrow back in again is kind of how I think things progress.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like a bunch of tools right now that are not accessible via code, that's all like interface based. I think those will change, because it's not as easy for ChatGPT to automate those things. And so I think tools are going to have this like back end that is maybe not even necessarily for developers, but it is just like literally for ChatGPT to like mess with things behind the scenes. Because if it's all just clicks and drags and all these different things that are obscured and it has no idea, then it can't create an interface in that setting. So like I can see a lot more tools going to this like more configurable backend now that this is a tool that everyone has access to. If you just ask ChatGPT like, oh, make this interface do this other thing that it doesn't do yet, and you can reconfigure it, then you know, it's way more powerful than like learn this tutorial that takes you hours, and someone has to make the video in the first place, and like, you know, they had to learn it. Like, it's just the iteration time, I think, of learning will go up or down.
Well, just gonna close it, guys. It's 8. It's been 2 hours. Thank you so much, really. This is great. I want to just like say this conversation could go on the Discord if you want. Your contributions to this were super valuable. We will see this as a video transcript, and I will just post it on the website that I collect all of the things. But I think this is just the start of, you know, I also followed a lot your work on Twitter. I will follow it more of all of you guys, and I hope that there is going to be more chance in the future to follow up with whatever happens next in this field, and this intersection of fields. I just want to post again the 2 Discords here. Let me just make it clear for everyone. There you go. And have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much.